I never thought a brick chimney in suburban Phoenix would become the center of a legal nightmare. But then again, I never expected Karen Patterson to move into the house next door. My name is Lucas Kennedy, and I had been living peacefully in my home in the Willow Creek subdivision of Scottsdale, Arizona, for 6 years before the trouble started. The house was a beautiful 2-story Mediterranean-style property with terracotta tiles and a classic brick chimney that I actually used during the surprisingly cold Arizona winter nights. My wife Sarah and I loved hosting friends around the fireplace, enjoying the ambience while the desert temperatures dropped into the 40s outside. Everything changed the day Karen Patterson became the HOA president. She was a 47-year-old woman with short bleached hair cut in that signature angular style, always dressed in athleisure wear despite never actually exercising, and she had opinions about everything. Within 2 weeks of taking office, she had sent out 17 violation notices to various homeowners for infractions ranging from trash cans being visible from the street to mailbox numbers being half an inch too small. I had managed to avoid her wrath until October 2025, when I scheduled my annual chimney sweep. Arizona might be hot most of the year, but I took fire safety seriously. The buildup of creosote in chimneys causes thousands of house fires every year, and I was not about to become a statistic. I had used the same company, Desert Chimney Services, for the past 4 years, and they always did excellent work. The appointment was scheduled for October 15th at 9 in the morning. I had taken the day off work specifically for this, as I wanted to be home to discuss any potential issues with the sweep. The night before, I received an email from the company confirming the appointment and noting that their truck would need to park in front of my house for approximately 2 hours while they worked. That morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and waited. At 8:45, I saw the Desert Chimney Services truck turning onto our street. It was a white commercial van with their logo painted on the side, complete with a cartoon chimney sweep holding a brush. The driver, a man named Miguel who I recognized from previous appointments, began to pull up in front of my house. That was when Karen appeared. She came storming out of her house, which was directly next to mine, wearing bright pink yoga pants and a white tank top, her face already red with anger. She marched directly into the street and stood in front of the van, holding up her hand like a crossing guard. I was watching from my living room window, completely baffled. I grabbed my phone and headed outside. "Excuse me," Miguel was saying from his rolled-down window. "I need to park here for a service appointment." "I don't care what you need," Karen snapped. "This is a violation of HOA parking regulations. Commercial vehicles are not permitted to park on residential streets between the hours of 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. on weekdays." I reached them just as Miguel was pulling out a clipboard. "Madam, I have an appointment with the homeowner." "This is a scheduled service." "Karen, what are you doing?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "This is my chimney sweep. I scheduled this weeks ago." She whirled on me, her eyes blazing. "Lucas, you know the rules." Section 12. Paragraph 4 of the HOA covenant clearly states that commercial vehicles cannot park on the street during business hours. It is an eyesore and brings down property values. "It's a chimney sweep," I said, feeling my own frustration rising. "He is literally here to prevent my house from burning down. This is essential maintenance." "I don't care if he is here to install gold-plated toilets," Karen said. "The rules apply to everyone equally. If we make exceptions, then chaos reigns. Next thing you know, we will have plumbers and electricians, and who knows what else cluttering up our beautiful streets." Miguel looked at me apologetically. "Sir, I have another appointment at 11:30 in Temp. If I cannot park here and access your chimney, I am going to have to reschedule." "No, no, you are parking here," I said firmly. I turned back to Karen. "Get out of the way, this is ridiculous." "I will not," she said, crossing her arms. "And if this vehicle parks here, I will personally call the towing company." "You cannot tow a vehicle that is here for a scheduled service appointment," I said. "That is not how any of this works." "Watch me," Karen said. We stood there in a standoff for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 30 seconds. Other neighbors were starting to come outside, curious about the commotion. I saw Jerry Martinez from 3 houses down standing on his porch with his coffee mug, watching with interest. "Karen, please be reasonable," I tried again. "He will be here for 2 hours. That is it. Then he will be gone." 2 hours of covenant violation, she said. "That is 120 minutes of our neighborhood looking like a commercial district instead of the upscale residential community we pay HOA fees to maintain." Miguel cleared his throat. "Sir, I really need to make a decision here. I have a tight schedule today." I felt trapped. On one hand, I desperately needed this chimney cleaned. On the other hand, Karen was literally standing in the street blocking access, and I could not exactly move her physically. That would be assault, and she looked like the type who would press charges in a heartbeat. "Can you park in my driveway?" I asked Miguel desperately. He shook his head. "I need street access for the equipment. The vacuum truck needs to be positioned on the street side to run the hoses up to your roof. If I park in your driveway, I cannot reach the chimney. The hoses are not long enough." Karen looked triumphant. "Then I suppose you will have to reschedule." "This is insane," I said. "You are interfering with essential home maintenance. I am enforcing the covenants that everyone in this neighborhood agreed to when they purchased their homes," Karen said primly. "It is not my fault you did not read the fine print." "I read every word of those covenants," I shot back. "And nowhere does it say that maintenance vehicles cannot temporarily park for essential services. The parking restriction is about long-term parking and abandoned vehicles, not service appointments." "That is your interpretation," Karen said. "Mine is different. And as HOA president, my interpretation is the official one." I pulled out my phone. "You know what? Fine, I am calling the police. You are blocking traffic and interfering with illegal business activity." For the first time, Karen looked slightly uncertain. "You would not dare." "Watch me," I said, echoing her earlier words. I dialed 911, then realized that was probably overkill for this situation. I hung up and instead called the non-emergency police number for Scottsdale. A dispatcher answered on the second ring. "Scottsdale Police Department, non-emergency line." "Hi, yes, I need an officer to come to Willow Creek subdivision," I said. "There is a woman blocking a service vehicle from accessing my property for scheduled maintenance." Karen's eyes widened. "You are seriously calling the police on me?" "I am the HOA president." "I don't care if you are the Queen of England," I muttered. The dispatcher asked for my address and told me an officer would be there within 15 minutes. I thanked her and hung up. Miguel looked uncomfortable. "Sir, I really cannot wait around for the police. I have to move on to my next appointment. I am going to have to reschedule you." My heart sank. "How much is the rescheduling fee?" $150, he said apologetically. "It is in the contract. When a customer cancels, or we cannot complete the service due to property access issues, there is a fee." "This is not a property access issue," I said desperately. "This is a crazy person blocking the street." "I understand, sir, but company policy is company policy. You can call the office and discuss it with them, but I have to charge you the fee and reschedule." I wanted to scream. Instead, I took a deep breath. "Fine, reschedule me. and I need documentation that shows I did not cancel, that access was blocked by a third party." Miguel nodded and started writing on his clipboard. "I can note that in the report. Today's date, October 15th, 2025, service could not be completed due to street blockage by neighbor. I will initial it and you can get a copy from the office." "Thank you," I said. Karen looked pleased with herself. "See, problem solved. No violation occurred." "Oh, we are far from solved," I said coldly. "You just cost me $150 and compromised my home safety. The police are still coming." "For what?" Karen scoffed. "I was just standing on a public street. That is not illegal." "Obstruction of traffic is illegal," I said. "So is interference with legal business activities. We will see what the officer says." Miguel pulled away, and I watched the chimney sweep van disappear down the street with a sinking feeling in my stomach. 6 years of timely maintenance, and now I would have to wait who knew how long to get rescheduled during their busy fall season. The police arrived 12 minutes later. Officer Bradley Thompson was a calm-looking man in his mid-30s who listened patiently as both Karen and I explained our sides of the story. By this point, at least 5 other neighbors had gathered to watch the drama unfold. "So let me get this straight," Officer Thompson said. "Madam, you blocked a commercial vehicle from parking on the street because of HOA rules." "Exactly," Karen said. "I was enforcing our covenants. And sir, this was a scheduled appointment for chimney maintenance." "Yes," I said. "Annual inspection and cleaning, required for fire safety." Officer Thompson nodded slowly. "Madam, HOA covenants do not supersede city ordinances or legal rights. A homeowner is entitled to have service vehicles access their property for essential maintenance. You cannot physically block that access. But the HOA rules," Karen started. "Are not law," Officer Thompson interrupted. "They are a private agreement between homeowners, but they cannot prevent someone from maintaining their property in a safe manner. Chimney cleaning is essential fire prevention. So I cannot enforce the parking restrictions." Karen asked incredulously. "Not in a way that prevents essential services," Officer Thompson said. "If this was, say, someone parking a commercial truck here overnight or for days at a time, that would be different. But a 2-hour service appointment, that is reasonable and necessary." Karen's face was turning red again. "This is ridiculous. I am the president of this HOA. I have authority." "You have authority within the bounds of what is legal and reasonable," Officer Thompson said patiently. "What you did today crossed that line. You interfered with a legal business transaction and caused the homeowner to incur costs." "What costs?" Karen demanded. "The rescheduling fee," I said. $150, because you blocked access. They had to reschedule and I got charged." Officer Thompson pulled out his citation book. "Madam, I am issuing you a citation for interference with legal business activity. It is a municipal ordinance violation." Karen's mouth fell open. "You are citing me? Me? I was just doing my job as HOA president." "Your job does not include blocking public streets or preventing legal service appointments," Officer Thompson said firmly. He began writing on the citation. "This is a $200 fine, payable within 30 days. "This is outrageous," Karen sputtered. "I am going to fight this. I am going to call the mayor's office. I am going to—" "That is your right," Officer Thompson said calmly. He finished writing and handed her the citation. "You can contest this in municipal court if you wish. The instructions are on the back." Karen snatched the paper from his hand and glared at me. "This is not over, Lucas, not by a long shot." "Looking forward to it," I said. Officer Thompson turned to me. "Sir, for the record, I recommend you document everything that happened today. Take photos of your chimney. Keep all correspondence with the Chimney Sweep Company and file a formal complaint with your HOA board. Can I sue her for the rescheduling fee? I asked. You can file a claim in small claims court, Officer Thompson said. Given that her actions directly caused you to incur that cost, you would have a strong case. You would need documentation showing that the only reason for the rescheduling was her blocking access. I have that, I said. The Chimney Sweep Company noted it on their report. Good. Keep all of that. You might also want to consult with a lawyer about HOA harassment, depending on how this plays out. After Officer Thompson left, I went back inside and immediately called Desert Chimney Services. I spoke with the office manager, a woman named Patricia, and explained the entire situation. She was sympathetic and agreed to waive the rescheduling fee given the unusual circumstances, but the earliest they could get me back on the calendar was November 12th, nearly a month away. I really appreciate you waiving the fee, I said, but I am going to need documentation of what happened today because I am planning to take legal action. Absolutely, Patricia said. Miguel already filed his report. I can email you a copy within the hour. It clearly states that access was blocked by a neighbor, and that was the sole reason for the cancellation. Perfect. Thank you. After I hung up, I sat down at my kitchen table and started documenting everything. I wrote down the timeline of events, took screenshots of my original appointment confirmation email, and made notes of all the neighbors who had witnessed the confrontation. Then, I pulled up the HOA covenants on my laptop and started reading through the parking section that Karen had cited. Sure enough, Section 12, Paragraph 4 dealt with parking, but the language was not as clear-cut as Karen had made it sound. It stated, "Commercial vehicles shall not be parked on subdivision streets for extended periods, defined as exceeding 4 hours in a single day or overnight parking. Short-term parking for service appointments is permitted with reasonable notice to adjacent homeowners." Reasonable notice. I had not given Karen specific notice about the chimney sweep, but I also was not required to. The covenant said reasonable notice, not mandatory advance approval. And even if I had violated that provision, which I did not believe I had, the remedy was not for Karen to physically block the vehicle. The remedy would be a formal warning or fine from the HOA board after proper notice and a hearing. I was deep in research mode when my phone rang. It was Jerry Martinez, the neighbor who had been watching from his porch. "Lucas, hey man, I just wanted to say that what Karen did this morning was completely out of line." "Thanks, Jerry, I appreciate that. Listen, I caught most of it on my doorbell camera. If you need video evidence for court or whatever, I am happy to provide it." That was excellent news. "Jerry, that would be incredibly helpful. Could you email me the footage?" "Sure thing. I will send it over this afternoon." Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. By that evening, I had received calls and texts from 6 different neighbors expressing their support and frustration with Karen's increasingly authoritarian approach to the HOA. Apparently, I was not her only victim. She had been harassing people over minor issues for months, and resentment was building. One neighbor, Susan Chen, told me that Karen had threatened to fine her $300 because her garden gnome was visible from the street and was not in the approved decoration list. Another, Mark Davidson, said Karen had tried to prevent him from having his roof replaced because she did not like the color of the temporary dumpster in his driveway. "She is drunk on power," Susan said during her call. "Someone needs to stop her before this gets even worse." "I am working on it," I assured her over the next week. I prepared my case meticulously. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes, a sharp woman in her 50s named Rebecca Thornton. She reviewed everything I had compiled and nodded approvingly. "You have a solid case for small claims court on the rescheduling fee," Rebecca said. "The documentation from the Chimney Sweep Company is key. It establishes causation clearly. As for the larger HOA issue, you have grounds to file a formal complaint and potentially push for her removal as president." "How would that work?" I asked. HOAs are governed by their bylaws. "Typically, board members can be removed through a vote of the homeowners, or by the board itself if there is cause. Abuse of power, harassment, and interference with homeowners' legal rights all constitute cause. You would need to rally other homeowners and call for a special meeting." "Several neighbors have already reached out to me about her behavior," I said. "Good. Start building a coalition. The more people who are willing to speak up, the stronger your position. In the meantime, file your small claims case for the actual damages. Even though the company waived the fee, you can still sue for what you would have been charged because their waiver was a courtesy, not a legal obligation. The damages still occurred." I filed my small claims case against Karen Patterson on October 23rd. The filing fee was $35, and I requested $150 in damages plus court costs. The hearing was scheduled for December 3rd, giving both sides plenty of time to prepare. Karen did not take the lawsuit well. 2 days after she was served with the small claims filing, she retaliated by issuing me a formal HOA violation notice. According to her letter, my front yard grass was 1/4 inch above the maximum permitted height of 3 inches, and I had 7 days to remedy the violation or face a $100 fine. I measured my grass myself. It was 2 3/4 inches tall. Karen was simply lying. I took photos with a ruler visible in each shot, time stamped and dated, and immediately filed a formal complaint against Karen with the HOA board. The board consisted of 5 members: Karen as president, Tom Wilcox as vice president, Sandra Morrison as treasurer, David Park as secretary, and Rita Holmes as a general board member. I sent my complaint via certified mail to all 5 board members, detailing Karen's harassment, her false violation notice, and her October 15th interference with my chimney sweep. I attached all documentation, including Officer Thompson's citation, the chimney sweep report, Jerry's doorbell camera footage, and my photos of the grass measurement. I am requesting an emergency board meeting to address President Patterson's abuse of power and harassment of homeowners, I wrote. Her actions are creating legal liability for the HOA and destroying neighborhood harmony. I am also requesting that she recuse herself from any decisions regarding violations against my property due to clear bias and retaliation. Tom Wilcox called me 3 days later. He sounded tired. "Lucas, I got your complaint. So did the rest of the board." "And?" I asked. "And we are scheduling a special board meeting for November 2nd. Karen is. Well, she is not happy, but the rest of us are concerned about the situation. This is not the first complaint we have received about her behavior. Really. We have been getting emails and calls for weeks. The chimney sweep incident was just the breaking point. Several homeowners are threatening to sue the HOA over her actions." "Good," I said. "Because someone needs to rein her in before this spirals even further out of control." "I agree. We will discuss everything at the meeting. You are welcome to attend and present your case." The November 2nd board meeting was held at the community center, a small building near the subdivision entrance. When I arrived at 7 p.m., the parking lot was packed. Apparently word had spread, and dozens of homeowners had shown up to voice their own grievances. The meeting room was set up with a long table at the front for the board members and rows of folding chairs facing them. Every seat was full, and people were standing along the walls. The energy in the room was tense. Karen sat at the center of the table, her face set in a stony expression. The other board members looked uncomfortable. Tom Wilcox called the meeting to order and immediately launched into the agenda. "We are here tonight to address multiple complaints regarding HOA management and enforcement," he said. "We have received formal complaints from Lucas Kennedy and several other homeowners regarding alleged harassment and abuse of power. We will hear from each complainant, then discuss remedies." I went first, presenting my entire case with the documentation projected onto a screen behind me. I showed the doorbell camera footage of Karen blocking the street, played audio of my conversation with the police officer, and displayed the false violation notice about my grass alongside my photographic evidence proving it was false. "This is not about enforcing rules," I concluded. "This is about targeted harassment because I stood up to her unreasonable interference. President Patterson has created legal liability for this HOA and has made our neighborhood a hostile environment." When I finished, there was spontaneous applause from the audience. Karen's face turned an alarming shade of red. "That is completely out of context," she said sharply. "Everything I did was within my authority as HOA president." "Then explain the false violation notice," Tom said quietly. "We have photographic evidence that his grass was within regulations." "My measurement was different," Karen said. "Did you actually measure it?" Sandra Morrison asked. "Or did you just eyeball it?" Karen hesitated. "I used my professional judgment." "That is not an answer," David Park said. "Either you measured it or you did not." "I did not need to measure it," Karen snapped. "I have been doing this for months. I know what 3 inches looks like." "Clearly not," Rita Holmes said dryly. Other homeowners spoke up after me. Susan Chen described the garden gnome incident. Mark Davidson talked about the roof replacement harassment. A man named Paul Rogers explained how Karen had threatened to fine him because his teenage son's car had stayed parked in front of their house for more than 24 hours while the garage was being cleaned out. By the time everyone had finished, it was nearly 9 p.m. and the case against Karen was overwhelming. Tom called for a 15-minute recess so the board could discuss in private. When they returned, Tom looked grim. "The board has voted 4-1, with President Patterson dissenting, to formally censure President Patterson for abuse of power and harassment of homeowners. Additionally, we are removing her from the position of HOA president effective immediately. Tom Wilcox will serve as president for the remainder of the term." The room erupted in applause. Karen stood up so fast her chair fell backward. "You cannot do this," she shouted. "I was elected by the homeowners. And the bylaws give the board the power to remove officers for cause," Tom said. "We have abundant cause. You are welcome to remain on the board as a general member, but you no longer have executive authority." "This is a coup," Karen said. "I will sue the HOA. I will sue all of you personally." "That is your right," Tom said calmly, "but the decision stands." Karen grabbed her purse and stormed out of the meeting room, slamming the door behind her so hard that the walls shook. The homeowners broke into applause again, this time with actual cheering mixed in. After the meeting, several people came up to thank me for standing up to Karen. Susan Chen hugged me. Jerry Martinez offered to buy me a beer. Even Tom Wilcox shook my hand and apologized for not acting sooner. "We should have stepped in weeks ago," he said. "We just kept hoping she would calm down. Obviously, that was a mistake." "The important thing is that it is handled now," I said. But it was not quite handled. I still had the small claims court date approaching, and Karen was still technically on the board, even if she no longer had executive power. I had a feeling she was not going to go quietly. The next few weeks were relatively peaceful. Tom Wilcox proved to be a much more reasonable HOA president. He sent out an email clarifying the parking regulations, explicitly stating that service vehicles were permitted for reasonable appointments. He also instituted a new policy requiring that all violation notices be reviewed and approved by at least 2 board members before being sent, preventing any single person from weaponizing the rules. Karen, meanwhile, became a recluse. I barely saw her except for occasional glimpses of her car pulling in and out of her driveway. She did not attend any HOA events or meetings. According to neighborhood gossip, she was spending all her time preparing for the small claims court case. My chimney sweep appointment finally happened on November 12th. Miguel and his team arrived right on time, parked on the street without incident, and completed the work in just under 2 hours. The chimney was in good shape, just needed the annual cleaning. As I watched them pack up their equipment, I felt a sense of relief. This whole mess could have been avoided if Karen had just minded her own business. December 3rd arrived, and I took the morning off work to go to small claims court. The courthouse was in downtown Scottsdale, a modern building with high ceilings and lots of natural light. I arrived 30 minutes early and reviewed my notes one more time. Rebecca Thornton had coached me on small claims procedure. It was relatively informal compared to regular court, but I still needed to be organized and clear. I had my evidence binder with tabs for each document: the original appointment confirmation, the chimney sweep company's report, Officer Thompson's citation, the email from Patricia about the waived fee, and photos showing that the fee was standard company policy. Karen arrived 10 minutes before our scheduled hearing time. She was wearing a navy blue suit that looked like she had bought it specifically for court, and carrying a leather portfolio that she clutched like a shield. She did not look at me or acknowledge my presence in any way. When our case was called, we both approached the bench. The judge was a middle-aged Hispanic woman named Judge Maria Sanchez, who had a reputation for being no nonsense but fair. "This is case number 25-4789, Lucas Kennedy versus Karen Patterson," Judge Sanchez said. "Mr. Kennedy, you are the plaintiff. Please present your case." I took a deep breath and launched into my explanation. I kept it concise and factual, walking through the timeline of October 15th and the direct causation between Karen's actions and the rescheduling fee. I handed copies of my evidence to the judge and to Karen. "The key point, Your Honor, is that Miss Patterson's interference directly and solely caused the cancellation of my appointment. The chimney sweep company documented this fact. While they ultimately waived the fee as a courtesy, I still incurred that damage because of her actions. Additionally, she was cited by Scottsdale police for interference with legal business activity, which establishes that her conduct was unlawful." Judge Sanchez reviewed the documents carefully, taking her time with each piece of evidence. Then she looked up at Karen. "Miss Patterson, what is your response?" Karen stood up straighter. "Your Honor, I was simply enforcing the HOA covenants that all homeowners agreed to. The parking restriction is clearly stated in Section 12, Paragraph 4. Mr. Kennedy chose to schedule a service appointment without proper notice to adjacent homeowners, and when I attempted to enforce the rules, he called the police on me and is now trying to extort money from me." "Extort?" Judge Sanchez raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Kennedy filed a legitimate small claims case for damages he incurred because of your actions. That is not extortion." "But I was just doing my job as HOA president," Karen protested. Were you the HOA president on October 15th? Judge Sanchez asked. Yes. Are you still the HOA president? Karen hesitated. No, I was removed from that position. Why were you removed? That is not relevant to this case, Karen said quickly. I think it is, Judge Sanchez said. It speaks to whether your actions on October 15th were reasonable and within your authority. Mr. Kennedy, do you have information about Miss Patterson's removal? I pulled out a copy of the board meeting minutes. Yes, Your Honor, Miss Patterson was removed from the HOA presidency by a 4-1 board vote on November 2nd, 2025, for abuse of power and harassment of homeowners. The incident on October 15th was specifically cited as one of the reasons for her removal. Judge Sanchez read through the minutes, her expression growing more stern. When she looked back up at Karen, her voice was cold. Miss Patterson, based on the evidence presented, your actions on October 15th were not reasonable enforcement of HOA covenants. You physically blocked a service vehicle from accessing Mr. Kennedy's property for essential fire safety maintenance. The Scottsdale police agreed, which is why they cited you. The HOA board agreed, which is why they removed you from office. Your conduct directly caused Mr. Kennedy to incur a $150 rescheduling fee. But he did not actually pay it, Karen said desperately. The company waived it. The company waived it as a courtesy after Mr. Kennedy explained the unusual circumstances, Judge Sanchez said. That does not mean the damage did not occur. If someone hits your car but your insurance covers it, you can still sue the person who hit you. The principle is the same here. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again, clearly having no response. Judgment for the plaintiff, Judge Sanchez said. Miss Patterson, you are ordered to pay Mr. Kennedy $150 in damages plus $35 in court costs, for a total of $185. Payment is due within 30 days. Additionally, I am noting in the court record that your conduct as described constitutes interference with legal business activity and harassment of a neighbor. If similar complaints come before this court in the future, this case will be considered as evidence of a pattern of behavior. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Karen looked like she had been slapped. You understand the judgment, Miss Patterson? Judge Sanchez asked. Yes, Karen said quietly. Then we are adjourned. As we left the courtroom, Karen turned to me in the hallway. Her eyes were filled with anger and something that might have been tears. I hope you are happy, she said. You have destroyed my reputation in this neighborhood. I did not destroy anything, I said. You did that yourself when you decided that enforcing rules was more important than being a reasonable human being. All I did was stand up for my rights. This is not over, Karen said. Yes, it is, I replied. You lost. You have been removed from power. You owe me money, and you have a court judgment against you. Move on. I walked away without waiting for her response. As I stepped out into the bright December sunshine, I felt genuinely free for the first time in weeks. The weight that had been sitting on my chest since October 15th had finally lifted. Karen paid the judgment on December 20th, 3 days before the deadline. She did it through her lawyer, who sent a check via certified mail so there was no direct contact. I deposited it immediately and used the money to take Sarah out for a nice dinner at a steakhouse in Scottsdale. We toasted to justice and reasonable HOA management. The story could have ended there, but Karen's vindictive nature had one more act to play out. On January 2nd, 2026, I received a certified letter from her attorney. It was a notice of intent to sue me for defamation based on statements I had allegedly made about her to other homeowners. I called Rebecca Thornton immediately. This is ridiculous, I said after explaining the letter. What statements? I told people the truth about what happened. Truth is an absolute defense to defamation, Rebecca said calmly. Do you have any documentation of what you actually said? Most of it was verbal conversations, but I did send some emails to other homeowners about the situation. I can forward those to you. Do that, and do not worry too much. This sounds like a desperate last attempt to harass you. If she actually files suit, we will crush it with an anti-SLAPP motion. What's that? Strategic lawsuit against public participation. It is a legal mechanism designed to quickly dismiss lawsuits that are intended to silence people from speaking about matters of public concern. HOA governance definitely qualifies. If we win the anti-SLAPP motion, which we would, she would have to pay your attorney fees. So this could actually backfire on her, spectacularly. I forwarded all my emails to Rebecca and tried not to stress about it. But as the days passed and January turned into early February, I heard nothing more from Karen's attorney. Apparently, once they realized they had no case and would likely end up owing me even more money, they advised her to drop it. The Willow Creek subdivision settled into a new normal. Tom Wilcox proved to be an excellent HOA president, focused on actual community improvement rather than petty enforcement. He organized neighborhood events, negotiated better rates with the landscaping company, and generally made people feel like the HOA existed to serve them rather than police them. Karen remained on the board technically, but she never attended another meeting. In March 2026, she submitted her resignation effective immediately. The resignation letter was brief and professional, with no explanation. According to neighborhood gossip, she was planning to sell her house and move to a different part of Scottsdale. I never spoke to her again after that day in the courthouse hallway. Sometimes I would see her car pulling out of her driveway early in the morning, presumably heading to work, but we never made eye contact or acknowledged each other's existence. It was like living next to a ghost. In April, a for sale sign appeared in Karen's yard. The house sold within 3 weeks, which was not surprising given the hot Arizona real estate market. The new neighbors were a young couple with 2 small children who seemed friendly and easygoing. When I introduced myself, the husband joked about having heard stories about the previous owner. We almost did not buy the house because of the HOA horror stories, he said. But everyone we talked to said the new management is great, so we took the chance. It is great, I assured him. Tom Wilcox is reasonable and fair. You will be fine. Karen moved out on a Saturday in early May. I happened to be in my front yard doing some gardening when the moving truck arrived. I watched from a distance as movers loaded furniture and boxes into the truck. Karen supervised everything with the same intense control she had brought to the HOA presidency, barking orders and checking items off on a clipboard. When the truck was finally loaded and pulled away, Karen did one final walk-through of her house. Then she came out, locked the door, and walked to her car. For just a moment, she glanced in my direction. Our eyes met across the 2 yards. I did not wave or smile or acknowledge her in any way. Neither did she. Then she got in her car and drove away. I never saw Karen Patterson again. The whole experience taught me several valuable lessons about HOA living. First, bylaws and covenants are important, but they should be interpreted reasonably and with common sense. Second, concentrated power in the hands of one person is always dangerous, even in something as mundane as a homeowner association. Third, standing up to bullies is hard and often expensive in the short term, but absolutely necessary for long-term peace. In June, the HOA held elections for board positions. I was nominated for a general board member position and won easily. I figured if I was going to live in an HOA community, I might as well help shape it into something reasonable. My first act as a board member was proposing a new policy requiring that any parking enforcement actions be reviewed by at least 3 board members before being implemented, with explicit exemptions for short-term service appointments. The policy passed unanimously. My chimney has been cleaned annually without incident ever since. Miguel still does the work, and he always comments on how much easier it is now compared to that October morning in 2025. I usually laugh and agree, though sometimes I still feel a flash of anger when I remember Karen standing in the street with her hand up like she had the authority to block essential home maintenance. The small claims court judgment, the police citation, and her removal from the HOA board were all matters of public record. I occasionally wondered if they affected her ability to find housing in another HOA community. Part of me hoped they did. A larger part of me just did not care anymore. She was someone else's problem now, if anyone's. Sarah and I still live in the same house in Willow Creek. We still use our fireplace on cold winter nights, and I still maintain it properly because I care about safety and being a responsible homeowner. The neighborhood has thrived under reasonable HOA management. Property values have actually increased, contrary to Karen's dire predictions about service vehicles bringing down the neighborhood. Jerry Martinez still jokes about the doorbell camera footage. At a neighborhood barbecue last summer, someone new to the subdivision asked about local HOA horror stories, and Jerry pulled out his phone to show the video of Karen blocking the chimney sweep truck. It has become something of a legendary tale in our community, a cautionary story about what happens when someone lets a tiny amount of power go to their head. I keep the small claims court judgment in a file in my home office, along with all the other documentation from that period. I probably will never need it again, but something about having that paper trail feels important. It is proof that standing up to unreasonable authority figures is possible, even when they hide behind official titles and organizational bylaws. The whole ordeal cost me time, stress, and some money, even after winning the judgment. But it was worth it. Not just for me, but for all the other homeowners in Willow Creek who were being harassed and intimidated by Karen's authoritarian approach to HOA management. By taking a stand, I helped create change that benefited everyone. Would I do it again if faced with a similar situation? Absolutely. Some battles need to be fought, even when they seem small and petty on the surface, because they are never really about the surface issue. The chimney sweep incident was not really about parking regulations or HOA covenants. It was about whether one person could arbitrarily interfere with another person's legal rights just because they held a volunteer position in a neighborhood organization. The answer, as both the police and the court confirmed, was no. Karen could not do that, and when she tried, there were consequences. Real, tangible consequences that cost her money, reputation, and ultimately her position of authority. I think about that sometimes when I am sitting by my fireplace on a cold Arizona winter evening. The chimney draws perfectly, the fire burns clean and safe, and my home is protected from the risk of a chimney fire because I was able to maintain it properly. That is what the fight was really about. Not rules or power or ego, but the simple right to keep my family safe in our own home. And that, in the end, was a fight worth having. The new HOA board implemented several other reforms in the months following Karen's departure. We created a formal appeals process for violation notices, so homeowners could challenge citations they believed were unfair without having to immediately resort to lawyers or courts. We established clear guidelines for what constituted legitimate enforcement versus harassment. We even brought in a mediator to help resolve disputes before they escalated to legal action. Tom Wilcox deserves a lot of credit for those changes. He could have simply continued with business as usual after becoming president, but instead, he used Karen's tenure as a learning experience. At a board meeting in July 2026, he actually thanked me for forcing the issue. "If you had not stood up to her," Tom said, "we probably would have kept enabling her behavior until someone sued the HOA for serious damages. You did us all a favor, even though it cost you personally." That meant a lot to hear. Sometimes when you are in the middle of a conflict, you wonder if you are being unreasonable or petty. Having the validation that I had done the right thing helped put the whole experience in perspective. The citation that Officer Thompson issued to Karen was also resolved, though not in the way she probably hoped. According to public records, she tried to contest it in municipal court, arguing that she was simply enforcing HOA rules and had a right to stand on a public street. The municipal judge disagreed and upheld the citation, adding an additional $50 fine for wasting the court's time with a frivolous challenge. So in the end, Karen's decision to block my chimney sweep cost her $250 in police fines, $185 in small claims court judgment and costs, and who knows how much in attorney fees for the various legal consultations and failed defamation threat. Not to mention her reputation in the community and eventually her home itself, since she clearly felt she could not continue living in Willow Creek after everything that happened. All of that because she could not let a chimney sweep truck park on the street for 2 hours. The proportionality of it still amazes me. If Karen had simply let Miguel park and do his job that October morning, none of the subsequent drama would have happened. She would still be HOA president, probably still harassing other homeowners, but without facing any real consequences. Instead, her inability to be reasonable about one single issue created a cascade of events that ultimately destroyed her position in the community. There is probably a lesson in there about picking your battles and knowing when to let things go. But Karen never learned that lesson, or if she did, it came far too late to save her from the consequences of her own behavior. As for me, I learned that documentation is everything. Having that doorbell camera footage from Jerry, the written report from the chimney sweep company, Officer Thompson's citation, and all my photographs and emails made the difference between my word against Karen's and an overwhelming factual record that left no room for dispute. Anytime someone asks me for advice about dealing with HOA issues now, I always tell them, document everything, photograph everything, and get things in writing whenever possible. I also learned that community matters. The support I received from other homeowners was crucial, both emotionally and practically. Knowing that I was not the only one who thought Karen's behavior was unreasonable gave me the confidence to keep fighting even when it would have been easier to just pay the rescheduling fee and move on. And the testimony from other homeowners at the November board meeting was what ultimately tipped the scales toward her removal. Individual action is important, but collective action is powerful. It is now 2026, and life in Willow Creek is genuinely pleasant. The HOA functions the way it is supposed to, maintaining common areas and enforcing reasonable standards without becoming a totalitarian nightmare. Neighbors are friendly and supportive of each other. Property values are strong. It is everything a planned community should be. Sometimes I drive past Karen's old house and see the new family's children playing in the front yard, their toys scattered on the lawn in a way that Karen would have considered a violation. But it is not a violation. It is just kids being kids in their own home. And that is exactly how it should be. The chimney sweep incident of October 2025 has become part of neighborhood lore, a story told at parties and barbecues with increasing embellishment over time. I have heard versions where Karen supposedly called the National Guard, or where the chimney sweep company sued the HOA, or where Karen went to jail. None of those things happened, of course, but the truth is dramatic enough on its own. A woman with a little bit of power decided to interfere with a homeowner's legal right to maintain his property. She was cited by police, ruled against in court, removed from office by her own board, and ultimately driven out of the neighborhood by her own behavior. No embellishment necessary. And my chimney? It gets cleaned every October like clockwork, keeping my home and family safe, which was the whole point all along.